Yo, what is up, guys? Welcome to the Live, Train, Perform podcast. I'm your host, Shaun Kober of Performance Functional Training. I'm currently the head strength and conditioning coach at the world-renowned Tiger Muay Thai and MMA training camp based in Phuket, Thailand. I'm a strength and conditioning coach, nutritional therapist, NLP master practitioner, a former Australian Army soldier, and combat veteran. This podcast is dedicated to bringing you the tools, knowledge, experience, and expertise to allow you to live your life to your fullest, train to your potential, and perform at your best. I'm going to do that by providing 3 different styles of podcasts. Style 1 is going to be 3 to 5 part mini-series, 15 to 25 minute episodes each, covering numerous topics including nutrition, lifestyle, sleep, stress management, and training philosophies. Style 2 is going to be me interviewing people at the top of their game, who they are, how they started out, where they got to where they're at, and what makes them tick. Style 3 is all about you guys. I'm going to be answering your questions. You can find that on my Q&A memes, which I'll be posting on my social media platforms. My social media platforms are at Instagram at KOBES_PFT, at Cobes_PFT. Facebook is Performance Functional Training, and YouTube is at Performance Functional Training. Make sure you like, subscribe, and follow those platforms. I will be referencing my YouTube channel throughout the episodes. So if you want your questions answered, go on to the memes, the Q&A memes that I'll be posting on my social media platforms. Pop in your questions and I will answer them for you on the podcast. So let's get it. Yo, what is up, guys? Welcome to today's episode, which is going to be a Q&A based session. So a number of my followers and listeners have written in via DM and via my Q&A memes on my social media platforms, and I'm going to be answering those questions on today's episode. So some of the topics that we're going to be discussing during today's episode is the relationship between your environment and your ability to perform, how to bring awareness to your movement quality, what is a good age to introduce lifting to children, and does lifting weights stunt growth? And the final question I'll answer is, how does lifting weight affect your mobility? Let's get started. The first question comes in from Joanna Ruckenstein on Instagram. How do I bring awareness whilst training and making sure that I'm always keeping good form? So many of us just do burpees or squats or run without paying attention to foot placement, hips, etc., which causes bad injuries. I absolutely agree with you there. And one thing that I want to talk about here is something called motor unit recruitment patterns. This is basically your brain creating a blueprint for movement. Now, the first time you learn how to do something, your brain doesn't have a blueprint. It needs to figure out what muscles should be firing when, in what order. Okay, so this is why it's super important to really practice technique, slow your movement down, and become competent and proficient at movement first. And this takes time in teaching your brain how to create a blueprint. Now, like I said before, when you're first learning how to do something, your brain needs to expend a lot of energy basically trying to figure out how to do that thing. So if we take a deadlift, for example, if you're learning how to do a deadlift, you don't just walk into the gym and start smashing through as many reps as you can as fast as possible with a weight that you can barely handle. Okay, you need to practice the technique first, and every single person is going to need to go through different progressions. So if I'm looking at a deadlift, I'm looking at loading up the extensors of the body, so primarily the hips, the hamstrings, and all of the musculature of the back. Okay, it's about creating stability in the hips and the shoulders and the spine. And once the primary engines of the body are stabilized, being the hips and the shoulders, then that allows the spine to be put in a good stable position. And the spine is what links those two primary engines together. All right, so stability must come first. Our brain is like a governor. So think about it like this. If I get a piece of shit Honda Civic and I put a fucking Ferrari engine in it, okay, that car is going to fall to pieces because, it's producing so much fucking force that the chassis and, the body of the car and the structure of that car is not going to be able to handle it. All right. So the brain is kind of like a governor of the body, and it understands that if the joints are not in a stable, strong, sturdy position, then it's going to reduce force output, which means that you're not going to be able to produce as much strength, you're not going to be able to produce as much power or speed. All right, so we first need to practice stability. Stability is the body's ability to resist force. Strength, on the other hand, is the body's ability to exert force. Okay, so we need to be in a stable position through the hips, the shoulders, and the spine before we can start upregulating neural drive to those muscles to get those muscles firing harder, stronger, and faster. Now, the reason that stability is so important is that our muscles are what control our skeleton and articulate and move our joints. Okay, so all of the muscles surrounding the joint need to be firing optimally so that the joint can move correctly. If the muscles surrounding the joints are not firing optimally to hold that joint in correct alignment, then there's going to be a slight change in how the joint moves. Let's take the knee joint, for example. It's a very simple joint, very easy to explain. Okay, it's a hinge joint. The quads primarily extend the knee and the hamstrings primarily flex the knee. Okay, can you have a little bit of rotation, lateral flexion? Yes, a little bit, but not much. It's a stable joint. Okay, it flexes and extends. So if the quads are dominant, for example, like they are in most people, and the adductors, the muscles on the inside of the legs, are tight, which they are with most people, then our abductors and our hamstrings, the muscles of the back of the leg, and the muscles on the outside of the leg that flex the knee and take the hip away from the midline of the body, where you kick the leg out to the side, if those muscles are underactive, then what's going to happen is when your knee flexes, if there's an imbalance between the inside muscles being the adductors and the outside muscles being the abductors, now when that joint flexes and extends, or when that joint moves, you're now creating friction because the muscles are in balance, which is pulling the joint into slight misalignment. So every time you flex that knee or extend that knee, okay, instead of being even wear and tear on the articular cartilage to take the load and distribute and displace that load, then that joint might be slightly shifted to one side, and now instead of that wear and tear being evenly distributed across the articular cartilage, now it might be grinding away on one particular spot because certain muscles are overactive and pulling the joint into slight misalignment. All right, and this is not something that's going to hurt initially. It's not an acute problem. This is more of a chronic problem, okay? Because if you don't address your motor unit recruitment patterns, being the right muscles firing at the right time in the right order to hold your joint in correct alignment, which then allows that joint to move efficiently and freely, now that's going to cause wear and tear over time, and it's going to put a lot of load and a lot of strain through the connective tissue, being the ligaments and the tendons. Okay, and then over time, if one side is too tight, let's say the muscles on the inside of the leg are too tight, muscles on the outside of the leg aren't strong enough, okay, that's going to pull that joint into misalignment, and you might get some wear and tear on the inside of the knee, the articular cartilage, and on the outside of the knee, the ligaments and the tendons are under constant strain, okay? Now, over time, that's going to add up. The more you run, the more you practice movement, squat, deadlift, lunge, etc., then without addressing those patterns, then the more wear and tear you're going to create, the more strain is being put on that connective tissue. And, over time, that's going to add up to, my knee's been playing up for 6 months now. I didn't land on it. I didn't have any traumatic injury. But over time, that pain was just kind of talking to me. I kind of noticed that it was there. It was, it wasn't painful. Maybe a little bit of discomfort here and there, but over time, that's going to get worse and worse and worse until it gets to a point where you're like, now I can't do anything lower body because my knee starts screaming at me. And that's simply because you've practiced poor movement without addressing the root cause over and over and over again. And this has become your blueprint, okay? This is where your brain goes, cool, every time I squat, this is what I need to do, okay? I need to fire these muscles at this time in this order, okay? And you haven't addressed any imbalances, any recruitment pattern issues, and any discrepancies, and now that's become your default pattern. So to answer the question, it's pretty complex, but basically, you need to address your motor unit recruitment patterns. You need to do some soft tissue work, loosen up the muscles that are overactive, fire up the muscles that are underactive, do some banded distractions, and pull that joint back into alignment. This topic is way too dense to be able to get the points across during a podcast, but if you head over to my YouTube channel, Performance Functional Training, and you type in simple drills to address lower cross syndrome, this will give you a really good understanding of what I'm talking about here. So number one is soft tissue work to down-regulate and dampen the signal to those muscles that are overactive. Number two is use some banded distractions to essentially pull the joint back into correct alignment. And then number three is to activate the opposing muscles to hold the joint in that correct alignment. So now it can move freely. So basically what we're looking at here is loosening up what's tight, strengthening up what's weak, and getting the joint to move efficiently and effectively. So that was the long answer. All right, now the short answer is that you shouldn't be doing any movements that your technique breaks down. Okay, you shouldn't be changing the adaptation. You shouldn't be doing deadlifts or box jumps or burpees or anything like that for conditioning, unless you can do really fucking strict movements. I've spoken about this in a previous episode about people using deadlifts for conditioning or Olympic lifting for conditioning or fucking kipping pull-ups for conditioning. Okay, that's stupid. How many people do you see that are doing kipping pull-ups for conditioning but can't even do 5 good strict reps without kipping? Okay, they're basically bypassing that stability component. All right, they don't have the stability and the strength and the connection to have the muscles control those joints through that range. So now they're fucking going and throwing kipping movements in it and turning it into a conditioning session. Okay, that is fucking stupid. That is a recipe for disaster. That is an injury just waiting to happen. Now, don't get me wrong. If you have really competent and proficient movement patterns and you're super solid, you're super stable through all of these different movement patterns, like myself, for example, yes, I'm a CrossFit coach, but I don't train CrossFit. But I've got an athletic development background. I grew up playing rugby. I've done a heap of bodybuilding style work. I've done strength based work. I've done Olympic lifting style work. I've done power work, speed work, conditioning work, stability based work, corrective exercise, etc., etc. So, I've competed in a couple of CrossFit competitions as part of a team, and I've competed in 2 competitions and won both of them as part of a team. Now, I don't train CrossFit, but the fact is that I have a really solid movement. It doesn't matter if I've got 100 kilos or 200 kilos on a barbell, my deadlift looks the same. It doesn't matter if I've done 1 rep or 101 reps, my deadlift looks the same. Now, the biggest point that I want to make here is that I've gone through all of those different modalities of training for 20 years. Okay, I don't just fucking walk into the gym and do all of those exercises at the same time. Okay, I walk in and I might just practice deadlifting for 1 session and I'm fucking dialing my technique in. Okay, movement is a skill that needs to be practiced. Okay, train often, test seldom. All right, so you're training the movement patterns. You're training to get the right muscles firing at the right time in the right order. You're training muscular contraction. You're training good posture, good alignment, good tension, good control. All right, so biggest piece of advice I can give is put your fucking phone down, pay attention to every single rep that you do, okay? And then refine that technique over time and consistently. I'd recommend sticking to a program for roughly 4 to 8 weeks, okay? And then make some adjustments to it. You might go from a conventional deadlift into a sumo deadlift. Okay, and then from a sumo deadlift into a trap bar deadlift, and then a trap bar deadlift into a Romanian deadlift into a rack pull. Okay, you've literally got fucking training all year round. There's your programming. All right, but practice the movements. It's not about moving hard. It's not about moving fast. It's about dialing that movement skill in. Okay, and once you have that skill down pat, then you can start adding reps for time. Then you can start adding all of these other fucking variables, okay? But you need to pay attention to your movement when you're first learning something, because what you practice becomes permanent. An example of this is someone who, breaks their leg when they're 6 years old or something like that. Now, what happens there is the brain starts creating, you still need to move, right? You still need to get from A to B. You still need to walk. So your brain goes, all right, well, I still need to do these movements, but because that joints hurt, that bones hurt, that whatever, let's change your recruitment patterns. let's work around this. Let's bypass. Let's find a detour that's going to allow us to get to the same point, but we take a slightly different route, okay? And 20 years later, that person's still walking with a little bit of a limp, or you can see that, one ankle rolls in and their knee collapses in when they squat or when they walk or something like that. And I see this all the time. I'll go through and I'll send an email to my clients. They'll answer, injury history, medication, surgeries, training, nutrition, etc., etc. Okay, they'll get into the gym. The first thing I do is we go through all those questions, but then I'll go through a movement screen and I'll just simply get them to take their shoes off and walk from one end of the gym to the other, okay, and turn around, walk back. And then the next lap, they're going to jog. And then the next lap, they're going to get a little bit faster and a little bit faster. Okay. And what I'm identifying here is any imbalances, any discrepancies in their movement. Okay. Now, here's the thing. If I can fucking pick something up when someone's walking, I can see their arch collapsing, their knee caving in, then their femur going into internal rotation. Guess what? That tells me that there's some sort of problem there. There's some sort of muscular imbalance that's pulling their joint into misalignment, okay? Then I ask the question, hey, have you got any knee pain? Oh, yeah, I've got some pain in my knee when I do X, Y, Z, or when I run or something like that. All right, cool. What about the back? Yeah, I feel something in my back now and again. Okay, and I'm looking at the same thing with, spinal alignment. I'm looking at the shoulders, okay? If I can see that, one shoulder's a little bit higher than the other and the arm swings across the body and the thumb is facing in, then guess what? There's going to be some misalignment there. And I'm like, hey, do you have any problems with, tension headaches or something like that? And they're like, yeah, I get it pretty bad on my right side. All right, I'm fucking seeing that stuff at a very low intensity. That is just walking. Think about what happens when these same people then go and load up and they start running and they start increasing that intensity. Okay, the more problems there are at low intensity, the fucking more that spotlight shines on those issues when that intensity starts increasing. All right, so addressing your movement patterns and making sure you're dialing them in and being proficient with movement before you start adding all these other complexities, super important, okay? That's going to stop you from injuring yourself way further down the line. The next questions I'll answer come in from two of our professional fighters at Tiger Muay Thai, and they're kind of similar questions, so I'm going to answer them in the same segment. The first question comes in from Hulk Mafia. Can people around you affect your performance? If yes, how do you know it? Good question, man. Absolutely, people around you can impact your performance. And I spoke about this in one of my last episodes on the effect of your environment. So we have the internal environment, which is essentially your mental toughness, your mental resilience, and how you view the world. And then you have your external environment, which is basically everything that you take in through your senses. So this is the news that you listen to, the people that you follow on social media, the people you hang out with in your own time. This is the food that you eat, the type of training that you do. Literally everything has an impact, okay? So your environment plays a massive part on, how you can perform and basically all of the variables that occur throughout the day. So let me give you a little bit of an example of what I mean of the difference between the internal environment and the external environment. Now, I want to point out that these are both interrelated. So the internal environment is going to affect your external environment, and likewise, the external environment is going to affect your internal environment. So when we can't control one, we must manage the other. There is a concept in the psychological literature known as locus of control, which is unfamiliar to most people, even though, once it's defined, is commonly understood. Locus of control is an individual's belief system regarding the causes of his or her experiences and the factors to which that person attributes success or failure. This concept is usually divided into two categories, internal and external. If a person has an internal locus of control, that person attributes success to his or her own efforts and abilities. A person who expects to succeed will be more motivated and more likely to learn. A person with an external locus of control, who attributes his or her success to luck or fate, will be less likely to make the effort needed to learn. People with an external locus of control are also more likely to experience anxiety since they believe that they are not in control of their lives. This is not to say, however, that an internal locus of control is good and an external locus of control is bad. There are other variables to be considered, however. Psychological research has found that people with more internal locus of control seem to be better off. Example, they tend to be more achievement-oriented and get better paying jobs. Now, the reason I bring that up is because we all know someone who, if we run into them, they're fucking energy vampires. They just drain your energy and you walk away feeling like you've been fucking a punching bag for someone. All right, we all know these people. Now, here's the thing. If you have a strong internal locus of control, you can just compartmentalize that conversation or that interaction with that person. You can walk away and not let it affect you too much, okay? People, on the other hand, who have an external locus of control, when they run into that person, they walk away and the rest of their day is fucked. Their whole mindset's been thrown out of whack, and it makes it very difficult for them to achieve anything and get anything done. So I feel like there's two parts to answer this question. The first part is you need to manage your own mindset. There's a very good book called The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck by Mark Manson, and this book is essentially how I live my life. I read it and I was like, this sounds like I wrote a book. And it's basically choose what you give a fuck about, because people in this day and age just fucking care about what everyone thinks and what people are posting and all this other bullshit that really doesn't affect them, all right? But people start letting these things affect them. So the book's message is not that you shouldn't give a fuck about anything. It's more the fact that you need to choose what you fucking care about. Choose what you wish to invest your time, energy, and effort in, okay? And anything that is outside of that, that's not valuable to you, that's not serving you, it's water off a duck's back. Like, it doesn't really matter. You don't let these things affect you. Now, if, obviously people are talking shit about you or there's rumors being started or whatever, it's like, well, I don't really give a fuck what these people think, and like their opinion doesn't really matter to me. And if they're talking shit about me, then they're probably talking shit about other people, and that's more of a reflection of them, and they're projecting their insecurities. So once you understand that, then it's much easier to just go, yeah, I don't really give a fuck what those people think. If, on the other hand, your friends and family and close people's opinions that you actually trust and respect start saying these things, then you probably need to have a closer look at yourself and make some adjustments, make some changes. Now, the other side here is that if you notice that when you spend a little bit of time with XYZ people and you always walk away from those interactions and you're always feeling like your energy's drained and you're picking up this mindset of whinging and bitching and looking at the negatives in things, then that's a good indication that those people are not serving you and are in fact having a negative impact on your mindset, which is also going to affect your ability to perform. All right, so it's very difficult to have these conversations with yourself, but sometimes you need to be ruthless. Sometimes you need to cut these people out of your life, or not necessarily cut them out of your life, but minimize your time and investment that you spend with these people, because you know that you can only handle them in short doses or small doses. Now, we've all heard this before. You are the sum of you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with, okay? And this is so true, okay? You pick up other people's tendencies. So simply paying attention to how you're feeling when you meet up with these people, you have these interactions, and how you feel afterwards, how you're feeling during the conversation, and then how you're feeling afterwards. And if you always walk away feeling like a punching bag, then it's probably worth reducing the time that you spend with those people. You can't change the people around you, but you can change the people around you. I had a very funny message a couple of weeks ago. I did a post on my social media stories about basically digging a hole when I was on my sniper's course and, having to live in it. And, the caption was, "Are you struggling with isolation? This is what we did for blah, blah, blah." So anyway, I had one of my mates message me and he goes, "I remember being in a pit with old mate in Singleton, which is initial employment training for becoming a infantry soldier. And he said, I formed a stutter because of his stuttering every day. We'd spent so much time together that we were picking up each other's mannerisms." All right. And this is so true. I'm sure when you get with certain people, when you spend time with certain people, you start using the same dialogue that they're using. We're very social creatures, okay? We start mirroring other people. We start using the same dialogue. We start using the same mannerisms. We start using the same body language and things like that. So simply paying attention to how you're feeling during those interactions and after those interactions will give you a good indication of, what those people are doing for you. The next question comes in from Mel Zeman, who is also one of our pro fighters. Similar question, what are some things that you find benefit your mental performance pre-competition and during hard training? Another good question, and it does tie in line with the last answer about your environment. Okay, again, you need to have a good internal environment and you need to create your external environment. We are a product of our environment. Now, we also create that environment. So, having a good internal environment by using mental preparation, visualization, balancing the autonomic nervous system. That might be something as simple as some meditation or mindfulness or something like that. It's a good tool. I won't go too woo-woo here, but basically, if you can manage your internal environment, your autonomic nervous system, most fighters are fucking jacked up all the time. They're always go, 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 go. They're looking for the next thing, okay? And that essentially puts you in a stress state constantly. So what we need to do is balance the autonomic nervous system. And this is where we focus on the recovery side of things and the breath work and the mindfulness and the meditation. And, it might be ice baths or sauna or something like that, and where you're focusing on your breathing and you're literally just calming the nervous system, okay? And this is an excellent tool for enhancing recovery, because if you're in a sympathetic state, which is our fight or flight stress state, then your ability to recover is affected, which then affects your ability to perform, which then has this kind of vicious cycle that flows on, okay? So we don't adapt in the gym. We provide the stimulus and then we rest, recover, and then we adapt outside of the gym. Which brings me to my next point, and I've spoken about this before, and that is train often, test seldom. Most people when they go in the gym, particularly high-level athletes, professional fighters, they're trying to smash themselves every single training session, all right? Drill good movement, practice the techniques that you're trying to improve upon throughout the week, okay? And then once a week, then test yourself. So as an example of this, our MMA classes on Monday and Friday are sparring. Okay, so on Monday, don't go into the gym and fucking burn off all your energy and go hard, okay? Because that's going to affect your ability to recover throughout the rest of the week, which is going to affect your ability to perform and dial in these techniques and get these skills right through the wrestling classes and things like that. So the Monday class, go into sparring and practice technique. You might do one round at the end where you go, all right, I'm going to pick it up a little bit, but you're not doing 5 rounds where you're hammering yourself, okay? Then you'll go through your wrestling-based drills on, say, Tuesday, Thursday, and you simply apply the same principles where you might do, say, skills and drills, and then you might do 2 rounds hard. Wednesday might be a little bit of a lighter day. Then Thursday, you go back into your wrestling class, and now you'll do 2 rounds hard at the end. And then your sparring session on Friday, once you go through a good solid warm-up, you might do 1 round where you're just kind of feeling it out, and then you're going to get after it for 4 rounds, okay? So this is kind of balancing everything out. And the reason I say this is because when people get after every single training session that they do, your heart rate's jacked up, your respiratory rate's jacked up, and your technique starts suffering, okay? So what we want to do is practice good technique. Once we have that good technique dialed in, and I spoke about this at the start of this session, then we can start adding more intensity, then we can go harder, then we can go faster, then we can go longer, okay? But practice the skills first, train those skills, and then test those skills once a week. Okay, now the other thing that I want to talk about here is the openness to and the ability to accept constructive criticism. And this is where having good training partners comes into play. So if the coach goes through certain skills and drills, then you might go away for a round and you're just going to drill those skills, and you're stopping with your partner and you're discussing, you're talking, you're workshopping different positions and different leverages and foot positions and energy transfer and all this type of stuff so you can get your technique right. Okay, and this is the importance of a good training partner. You want someone that's going to help build you up, and you're going to help build them up. Training partners are fucking essential. Good training partners are fucking essential for good development. You don't want someone that's just going to come out and try and go hard, because then you're going to go hard, and that's going to lead to, again, that jacked up heart rate, respiratory rate, and your technique starts suffering. So practice the technique in the earlier rounds, and then as you get those techniques more and more dialed in, then finish with a round or 2 where you're fucking getting after it and you're applying those techniques in a live scenario. Okay, so we practice good skills and drills in a controlled environment, and then we should be able to apply those skills and drills in an uncontrolled environment. To round out this answer, I just want to point out the importance of intent. You need to have an intent and a purpose for every single thing that you do, every single training session that you do. Okay, if you don't have intent, then you're just going to roll through the motions and you're not going to get as much out of it. So, set yourself up for success. Luck is the meeting between preparation and opportunity. Okay, so your preparation is what essentially puts you in a good position to then take advantage of any opportunities that come up. So leave no stone unturned when you're going through your fight camp, and think about, making sure that every single thing that you do has an intent behind it. Some days it's going to be, right, I'm testing my mental toughness, I'm testing my conditioning, I'm testing my skills and drills in a fucking fight situation, okay? That shouldn't be every single time that you train. That should be like once a week or something like that, depending on where you are in your fight camp, okay? Now, most of the time, you're going to be practicing skills and drills, okay? You're practicing technique for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, you're practicing technique for MMA, you're practicing technique for your kickboxing, Muay Thai, grappling, etc. You're practicing technique and developing strength, speed, power, stability, endurance, and energy system conditioning through your strength and conditioning program. Okay, everything has a purpose. Sometimes you'll get after it. Sometimes you need to back off. Okay, I'm going to have a little bit of a lighter day. I'm going to work through some mobility. I'm going to work on some activation. I'm going to work on basically giving my body a service so that I can walk back into the gym tomorrow and fucking be able to perform again. Now, here's the thing. When I'm talking about giving your body a service, this is essentially going through the recovery-based protocols. This could be anything from massages to mobility-based work, stretches, pool work, ice bath, sauna, float tanks, etc. Okay, but what also falls under this category is some form of mindfulness, meditation, or fucking breath work. Call it whatever you want. Okay, the whole idea here is that we balance out the autonomic nervous system. We allow the body to rest and recover so that we can adapt to those responses or that stimulus that we're creating when we're in the gym. Now, people look at mindfulness, meditation, breath work as fucking woo-woo shit, but let me tell you the practical applications for this type of stuff, okay? What happens if you go into a 3-round, 5-minute per round fight? Okay, you're working hard for 5 minutes. What happens when your heart rate gets jacked up and your respiratory rate gets jacked up? Okay, your technique starts failing. Okay, it starts breaking down. You can't produce as much speed, as much power, as much force output. You balance your coordination, timing, accuracy. Everything's off a little bit. Okay, now if you can practice some mindfulness-based work, and this might simply be, 10 breaths once a day, where you're literally just fucking closing off the external environment and bringing your attention and your awareness internal. And you're just paying attention to where you are right now, what you're feeling. So pay attention to your senses, okay? Listen, hear, feel, smell, etc. Okay, if you can do that in an uncontrolled environment and you can manage your heart rate and you can bring your heart rate and your respiratory rate back down, guess what happens when you go into your fight? You're working hard for 5 minutes. You've got a minute rest between rounds. Okay, now when you sit down, you practice 3 to 5 really fucking deep breaths. Bring your attention in, okay? And instead of walking out and starting the next round where your heart rate's still up at 150 beats per minute, now you're walking back out into the next round. Your heart rate's at 120 beats per minute. Okay, you go through the same process. You work hard for the second round. You go back to the corner. Okay, your heart rate's jacked up 170, 180. Focus on your breath. Focus on the recovery. Bring your attention, your awareness inside. Then heart rate comes back down, 120, 130. You're walking back out at a much lower heart rate. So then you can work harder. So it's not just about your ability to perform. It's about your ability to recover. If you can recover well, that's going to improve your ability to perform when you're actually on. The next question comes in from my man, Shane Crowley, one of my mates that I grew up with, played rugby with. His question is, with professional sports looking to target kids earlier and earlier in age and children trying to get bigger, faster, stronger, what is your advice on kids lifting weights at a young age? Is this something that could stunt their bone growth long term and lead to more injuries? Is a focus on body conditioning and nutrition more beneficial, and at what age would you introduce external weight? Excellent question. Now, I did do a lot of research on trying to find the studies that said that lifting weights for children stunted bone growth, and I fucking couldn't find anything. So I don't know where that myth started, and it doesn't make sense to me. Okay, now where I could see the problems arising is when you have children that are lifting weights that they cannot handle with poor technique. Okay, because our muscles are what control our joints. Okay, that's what articulate our joints, and that's what get our bones to move. So if children don't have good recruitment patterns, they don't have good movement quality where they can generate tension control, then the joint is essentially going to take that load. And this is where I could potentially see the joint and the connective tissue, the articular cartilage and the growth plates and the ligaments and the tendons having to take a fuckload of strain, which then causes issues and potentially reinforces these poor recruitment patterns, which then pull the joint into misalignment. So let's go a little bit deeper and discuss how bones are formed, because this will give us a little bit more of an understanding of how this myth potentially came about. Now, bones start off as cartilage. Okay, cartilage is laid down, and that becomes like the framework for how bones are built. Bone tissue is a living tissue that develops into one of the hardest types of connective tissue in the body. Now, they can be either compact or cancellous or spongy bone. All bones have an element of both, but the purpose of the bone determines the majority of its makeup. So bones are formed through a process called ossification. During ossification, chondrocytes, which are cartilage-forming cells, enlarge and arrange themselves in rows similar to the shape of the bone that they will eventually become. Then osteoblasts start producing the primary organic component of bone by adding calcium salts to produce osteoid, which is predominantly made up of collagen. Osteoclasts perform an antagonistic action to osteoblasts. So while the osteoblasts build and develop, osteoclasts break down and liberate minerals and other molecules stored within the bone matrix. They also play an important role in the remodeling of bone structure. So think about when you've broken a bone or something like that. Okay, your osteoblasts are producing and modeling the bone as you grow. But if you break something, then osteoclasts have to go through and break that bone mineral down so that it can be remodeled. So then the osteoblast can then come back in and start laying the foundation for bone again, and essentially fuse those two pieces of bone together. Long bones are found primarily in the limbs and are categorized by their shape and structure. Some classic examples of the long bones are the femur, tibia, and fibula in the lower body, as well as the humerus, radius, and ulna in the upper body. The clavicles are also considered long bones, along with the metacarpals, metatarsals, and phalanges, fingers and toes. Long bones are formed primarily by the elongation of the diaphysis, which is the central shaft. At either end is the epiphysis. Connecting these is the metaphysis. So the central shaft is the compact bone. The epiphysis on either end is basically spongy bone that meets up with the next bone on the other side of the joint and is held together by ligaments. Now the metaphysis is the growth plate. It's cartilage that sits in between the compact bone of the long shaft or the central shaft and the epiphysis being the spongy bone. It connects that, and basically when we're growing, when we're developing, the compact bone of the central shaft becomes longer as osteoblasts lay down more and more bone matrix for inorganic salts to attach to, which then calcify and give that compact bone its density and strength. Now, this process continues until we're about 25 years old. So once we get to about 25 years old, that hyaline cartilage, the growth plate in between the compact bone and the spongy bone, starts becoming part of the bone. It turns and forms into bone. So this is basically as tall as we're going to get in our life, and this is largely determined by genetics. The reason I went through that process and explained that is because when we talk about stunting growth with children due to the growth plates, Now it doesn't make sense, because if you start lifting weights at 15 and your growth plates and your bones are still developing up until you're 25 years old, that's basically like saying, hey, no one should fucking lift weights until you're 25 years old, until that growth plate closes up and calcifies and actually becomes bone. Can the growth of the bone be stunted due to, lifting weights or something like that? Yes, if you have a traumatic injury where you essentially snap your bone, then obviously, the development of that bone is going to go through a remodeling process and then have to be fused back together. So yes, that could potentially stunt growth. And, you might know people, I know people that have had, gunshot wounds to legs and things like that, and basically had to have their femurs snapped and then kind of fused together and then snapped again, and used a vise to kind of pull the bone apart, let it fuse again, then snapped again, use a vise, pull it apart, and repeat that process to essentially try and promote bone growth. Now, my mate has 2 legs that are different lengths due to this process, and I think he had multiple surgeries and had these fucking femurs snapped over and over and over again, and then pulled apart to allow that bone to fuse back together again. But, even with the technology we have these days, his legs are still different lengths. And you might know people that had a traumatic injury that snapped a bone when they were younger, and now they have some problems with their legs being different lengths or something like that. Now, I have been ranting for roughly 40 minutes, so I'll answer your question now. What's your advice on kids lifting weights at a young age? I recommend going light and teaching good mechanics. Now, they're not going to get the most out of it until they start hitting puberty, when, testosterone production increases. That's also going to lead to higher bone density, because now we're loading the structural components of the body, being the skeleton, and we start loading the muscles as well, which, teach the brain to connect to the right muscles to fire them at the right time in the right order. So maybe a year or 2 prior to hitting puberty is when you can start practicing good technique for the primal movement patterns, being hinge, deadlifts, squats, lunges, push in multiple directions, pull in multiple directions, and carries and things like that. And that's actually going to lead to a stronger, healthier human. But they'll get the most benefits once puberty hits. And if they've already got a year or 2's training under their belt, then we can start loading up those movement patterns and increasing muscle mass and bone density. The second part of the question is a focus on body conditioning and nutrition more beneficial, and at what age would you introduce external weight? So I answered external weight. Full body conditioning is going to be important. Obviously, kids are going to be running around, they're going to be moving, they're going to be playing. So we want to teach them how to play, how to move with quality movement patterns. Professional sports teams and organizations are targeting children at younger ages and identifying and trying to recruit them into sports. Now, I think that's a topic that would need an entire episode to answer. But basically, think about this. We adapt to whatever we do. So people that have been fighting, for example, doing boxing and martial arts and things like that from a young age, their bodies start adapting and morphing to those positions. I work with a lot of professional fighters who have these rounded shoulders and, these poor postures and things like that, simply because they're in this hunch position all the time, and they create these movement patterns and they create these blueprints for their body to start adapting to. Your body's constantly trying to conserve energy, so it's going to manipulate your positions and adjust your positions to try and conserve energy. Now, that can lead to overuse injuries in the long term. You get to, 20, 30 years old, and if you've been fighting for a long time, now your fucking shoulders don't move very well. And every time you go overhead, you don't have good mobility, so you start creating an arch in the lumbar spine, and that creates issues all throughout the body. So when kids are younger, encourage them to play multiple sports so they can get the benefits of, different movement patterns, different exercises, different positions, different abilities, different skills. There's balance, coordination, timing, accuracy, agility, speed, stability, strength, power, conditioning, etc., hand-eye coordination. All of this stuff comes into play. So we want to try and encourage kids to play multiple sports that are utilizing different movement patterns, different skills at a young age, so that when they get a little bit older, they're a fairly well-rounded athlete And then when they decide they want to become a professional rugby player or fighter or something like that, they've already got a really solid baseline, and then they can start building upon that base. So the bigger your base, the higher your peak can be. Some good recommendations for sports to get your kids into will typically include things like gymnastics. Okay, so we're basically teaching children how to manipulate, how to move, how to control their body through multiple positions, multiple directions, create stability, produce force, etc. Okay, and then you might add some ball sports in. It might be cricket or soccer or rugby or anything like that, so you can start developing hand-eye coordination. Might be tennis, golf, whatever. Okay, so include some gymnastics and a ball sport or two that they are going to enjoy. I mean, at the end of the day, if kids don't enjoy doing something, they're not going to fucking do it. And to answer the nutrition component, obviously that is going to be important. You need to make sure that you're giving your child the correct nutrients in the right amounts at the right time so that they can develop and they can take advantage of, going through puberty and having their fucking hormones all over the place. They can build, they can develop, and they can, grow into a strong, healthy human. And the point to note here is that you as a parent, you're on display, okay? Don't be one of those fucking parents that tells your child to eat vegetables, but you don't eat vegetables and you eat shit and you drink Coke every night, okay? Children are sponges, so you need to be their example. You need to be their role model, okay? Don't ask your child to do something that you're not fucking doing yourself. The final question for today's episode comes in from Spencer Blythe on Instagram. Hey mate, was working out at home today and thought of a question that maybe you could answer. How does lifting weights affect joint and muscle mobility? Okay, so let's define mobility. Mobility in my eyes is the ability to articulate your joints through their fullest range of movement with control. Again, your muscles control the joints. They control and move the bones. All right, so weights can affect mobility in either a positive manner or a negative manner. This really depends on how you use them. Let me give you an example here. If I walk into the gym and I'm one of those fucking gym bros that, hits International Chest Day 3 days a week, then I'm going to strengthen those muscles, and that's going to pull my shoulder forward. That's going to internally rotate my shoulder, my humerus. My thumb's going to be facing in, okay? I'm going to end up with this rounded posture. So that's going to affect my ability to take my joint through its fullest range of movement. If I'm not doing enough back work, now that joint's being pulled into misalignment. And I see this all the time with, like I said earlier, the fighters that I work with. They're doing, they're throwing all these punches in front of them and they're not doing that much work for their back. So what happens when they go overhead? They don't have the shoulder mobility to go overhead. They can't get their thoracic spine in a good position. They can't manipulate their scapula, which is essential for shoulder health. There's something called scapulohumeral rhythm, which is basically our scapula should move. Every time our humerus moves, our upper arm moves, our scapula should move along with it. And if that scapula is locked up, then that's going to affect your ability to take your shoulder through that full range of movement. So if the fighters, for example, are in a class and they've got an overhead exercise, they don't have the thoracic mobility, they don't have the shoulder mobility. So when they go overhead, instead of loading up through a vertical press, they don't have the mobility, so they create that movement, they create that mobility at another joint, and that typically comes from the lower back. So you'll see people pressing overhead that have poor shoulder mobility that create this big arch in the back, and they're not actually pressing overhead. They're kind of overhead, but they're more in front of them. All right, so this creates some issues if you don't strengthen the other muscles surrounding the joint, because now your joint's in a poor position and then you're going and loading that position. Okay, so we want to create stability first, have the joint in the correct alignment, so now all the muscles surrounding the joint can provide that quality movement and allow that joint to move free. So this is where a well-rounded training program comes into play. Okay, speak to a professional coach, speak to someone that you can actually get some work in with that goes through a movement screen or a movement assessment to identify any movement dysfunction or muscular imbalances or discrepancies or anything like that, and then get a specific program written up for you. Yes, you could get some fucking program off the internet that could potentially get you results if you don't have any problems. But if you've got any movement issues, if you've got any muscular imbalances and movement discrepancies, then, you could literally be loading up a fucking poor position over and over and over again, which is going to lead to overuse injuries. So invest some time in a good quality coach that's going to do some specific work with you to address any of these problems. Now, let me quickly discuss how using weights can actually improve your mobility. Let's take a squat, for example. If someone's a little bit locked up in the ankles and the hips, simply doing bodyweight squats or using a PVC pipe or broomstick or something like that might not provide enough resistance to actually allow you to get down in that bottom position. So what you might do is load up a barbell with whatever. If you can squat 100 kilos, you might just put 40 or 50 kilos on, okay? And then you're just going to lower under control, hit that bottom position, and just hold that position, maintain tension, maintain connection, and you're just going to hang out in that position, okay? And that weight is actually going to push you down into that position, which is going to loosen up those tight muscles of the hips and the ankles. That's going to allow you to get into a better position. Likewise, if you're doing front squats or you're doing any type of Olympic lifting or something like that, if you're in the front rack position where the bar's resting across your shoulders, your fingers are wrapped around the bars, your elbows are high, if you don't have the mobility in that position, then using a barbell, a loaded barbell, and just practicing that position and driving your elbows forward and creating a little bit of movement in the wrist, creating some thoracic extension, etc., could actually help you improve your mobility for that position, which is then going to go and lead into your training session. Okay, so using weights is and can be a really fucking good way of increasing your mobility. The Jefferson curl, for example, is an excellent way to create a little bit of length in the back or through the entire posterior chain, really, focusing on the hamstrings and the ligamentous tissue of the spine. So for most people, if they've never seen this before, it looks like a dangerous position, okay? But what you're doing is you're standing on a box and you're grabbing a kettlebell or a barbell or a dumbbell or something like that, and you're just basically folding forward and you're letting that weight pull you forward. Now, the important thing to note here is it's a controlled position, okay? You're not just flopping down in that position and allowing yourself to hang out in your joints. Your muscles are controlling that position, but that extra load working along with gravity is actually doing a good job to pull you into a deeper position so that you can increase the flexibility of the muscles, which then improves the mobility of the joints. I could literally go on and on and on about different examples and different exercises that are excellent for increasing mobility or examples that are poor for mobility. But I'm at 50 minutes on this podcast, so I need to wind it up here. But head over to my YouTube channel, Performance Functional Training, and there's 2 specific videos on there to address lower cross syndrome and upper cross syndrome, and this will give you a really good understanding of what I'm talking about. And I think I spoke about it earlier in this episode about loosening up what's tight, strengthening what's weak, and using some banded distractions or some other tool that's going to allow you to pull the joint back into good position. Okay, and once you create that extra mobility in that position, then you need to strength train it. You need to connect to that position. So that's the thing. Strength without mobility is a waste. Okay, you're limited. Mobility without strength is fucking dangerous. This is where you'll see yogis and things like that are hypermobile in the elbows and the shoulders and the hips and the back and all that sort of shit. Okay, and they're just flopping around from position to position. Yes, they can make some good shapes, but they have no control once they get there. They're just hanging out in their joints, okay? So again, mobility, once you increase the mobility of the joints, you then need to strengthen that position, and that's where the weights come into play. If you enjoy the message that I'm delivering, please help me spread the word and like, share, save, and subscribe to my social media platforms. Instagram is at KOBES_PFT, at Kobes_PFT. My Facebook is Shaun Kober, and my business page is at Performance Functional Training. You'll also find Performance Functional Training on YouTube. Go and check that out, and please pass this on to your friends, family, anyone else who would benefit from hearing this message. And if you could also leave me a 5-star rating and review, that would be much appreciated. Anybody who does leave me a 5-star rating and review will have precedence when it comes to my Q&A sessions. I'm going to be posting on my social media platforms in the coming weeks of questions and answers. You guys ask the questions, I will answer them on a podcast episode. That's it from me today, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed this episode, and I look forward to bringing you some awesome content moving forward. Peace.